Guys can have a seat. Thank you so much for being here. So glad to be able to see you. Welcome to Freedom Church, and also welcome to the brand new 9 a.m. worship experience. So great job to those of you that are here. Y'all are the best. We made this shift to 9, 10, 15, and 11:45 so that we could actually try our best to make more room for people at the other 2 hours, because those are the two primetime hours. And this one is the one that enables us to even have church at those two. So y'all are the ones that are my favorites. The 9 o'clock is my favorite crowd. And you love Jesus the most as well. So I think that you get some extra brownie points with JR. You don't get them with Jesus, but you did get them with me. And you stopped clapping whenever I said that. You don't get brownie points with Jesus. That's one of the things we probably need to talk about today, that we don't work to get brownie points from the Lord. That's the reason some of us are so exhausted, by the way, is that we are trying to earn the approval from God. We're trying to earn something that we already possess. Speaking of which, that's why we're talking about this very subject today called I'm So Exhausted. That's what the series is all about. It's called I'm So, and then every week we just fill in the blank. And one of the things that I know is that just in the context of life, if you are alive, and I hope every single one of you are, but if you are alive, then if you're alive and you're paying attention, I probably should say it that way, it is pretty easy to be exhausted right now. Is it not? Just so much going on in the world. I feel like every time I walk on stage, 5 minutes before I do, I check to make sure nothing crazy has happened in the world that I need to try to speak on or something like that. And I know it's been a crazy, crazy week in our country. And my gosh, I feel like I've been saying that every single week for the last 3 years. Every single Sunday, I feel like I've had to say, it's been a crazy week in our country. And that alone is exhausting, is it not? It's like just random stuff, horrible things. And when you sit around and watch it, it's just seeing the devil have a field day is not the best. And realizing that the devil really does have a plan to destroy your life. He hates you. He wants to steal, kill, and destroy from you. Or he wants to steal and kill and destroy you, not just steal from you. He wants to do the other things to you. And he's doing a really good job in the lives of a lot of people. And hopefully by us talking about this stuff week in, week out, we develop a game plan to make sure that he does not succeed in our own individual lives. If we want to change the world around us, we have to allow God to change our world first. Does this make sense? And so that being said, we want to try to talk about real deal subjects and talk about tough stuff. We're doing a whole series in August coming up that I'm both equally excited about and I'm a little bit apprehensive about, because I know what's going to happen in advance. It's going to be one of those very tough series. I'm going to literally bring a helmet on stage, and I'm going to put my helmet on in case things decide to be thrown my direction. But we do have security people that will take you out if that happens. But it's going to be an interesting series. But for the sake of today, I do want to talk about the fact that so many of us are extremely just exhausted in life. You can get exhausted from watching the news and watching the stuff going on around us. I did my little 5 minutes beforehand thing before I walked on stage, and they said that we're supposed to be extremely concerned about monkeypox. I was like, what is a monkeypox? I didn't know anything about a monkeypox. But apparently there's 80 people in the whole wide world that have monkeypox, 80. Which I'm terribly sorry for those 80 people, but 80, I mean, probably yesterday, 80 people had a lot of things, in the whole world. There's a lot of people in the world. And so it just shows that every chance we get, we're supposed to be afraid of something, are we not? It's exhausting. It's exhausting when you think about just the busyness of life and all the things that we have to do just to live, work, school, marriage, relationships, whatever. Navigating singleness is weird and awkward. I can't even imagine that at this time. The way that dating works now is so bizarre to me. I see commercials for things like farmersonly.com, and I'm very disturbed by this. But there are all kinds of things that are just exhausting. Commitments, even your own possessions, right? You have a house. Everybody's like, man, I can't wait to have a house. And the houses are awesome. I suggest everybody get one. But just know the moment you do, something's going to break. And just keeping up with that thing is obnoxious sometimes, right? It's like the moment you fix something and you're like, you look up and there's another leak or something else has happened. And it's just part of it. Relationship maintenance. Because, good relationships take maintenance, do they not? If you're like, no, they don't, that means you don't have good relationships. You might be completely oblivious because not everybody is self-aware. So the reality is just things take maintenance in life. It's exhausting at times. I was one time told by a counselor person that I have this thing called Unrelenting Standards. And it manifests itself internally more than it does externally, meaning it's about me, not about people. So listen to this. The underlying belief that one must strive to meet very high internalized standards of behavior and performance, usually to avoid criticism, typically results in feelings of pressure or difficulty slowing down and in hypercriticalness towards oneself. It involves significant, I do not like that word significant, impairment in pleasure, relaxation, health, self-esteem, sense of accomplishment, or satisfying relationships. Now, don't I sound like a barrel of fun? I just sound like the most fun individual on the planet after reading that. And for some of you, though, I bet that describes you at some level. I think there's a lot of ladies that describes, but I bet there's a disproportionate number of men that describes. And you think about how we take great pride in living in certain neighborhoods, driving a certain car. Some of you don't want to be a good parent. You want to be the best parent that's ever parented in the history of parenting. And you put this strange pressure on yourself to be this thing that, number one, is impossible to calculate. There's no way to actually know if you are the best parent that has ever parented in the entire world. There is no scale to figure out if that's true of you, yet we put that standard on ourselves. We have to either send our kids to the right school or we have to get into the right school ourselves. Think about grades, our income level. What income level do we want? Whatever the next one is above where we are currently right now. That's the income level that we desire. We constantly worry about control, being able to control things. A lot of us are control freaks, which is somewhat hilarious because you are not ever in control. You do need to know that. Like, even those of you that are the biggest control freak in the room, you're never actually in control at all. Anything could happen at any time and change the game completely. And it could be completely outside the realm of your control. That's why so many of us are exhausted watching television, because of the fact that we can't control what's happening all over the world. And yet our desire to do so is, obviously exhausting. Appearance, what we look like when we look in the mirror. And there's a lot of industries making a lot of money trying to help people not age. And just newsflash, you're going to age. There's nothing we can really do about it. We can Botox ourselves to death. We can do all the things. But there's really no way to beat that long term. The odds are very alarming on aging, and also very, very alarming when it comes to death as well. Every 1 out of 1 person is eventually going to die. Every 1 out of person, age is eventually going to get us at some point. And it is what it is. Social status. You would think that once you got out of high school, that stuff would end, but there used to be a song called High School Never Ends, and that song is true. High school never seems to end. A lot of us we just live our whole lives trying to earn the approval of other people. And as a result, we're exhausted. And here's what you need to know. I'm trying to help you today at 9 o'clock. I just need to let you know more of you than you realize are addicts. Some of you were like, well, I know I'm an addict. I'm talking about some of you are an addict and you didn't know it. And you're an addict to this thing that sounds noble, but it's really not. And that is performanceism. You're addicted to performanceism. And let me tell you why this is a challenge, because it almost sounds kind of good, but here's the reason it's not. To you, and to me, achievement is something that we do, it's not something that we do or don't do. It's who we are or we aren't. So for a lot of us, those of us who are kind of addicted to this performanceism thing, it's about the fact that it's not about what we do or don't do, it's about who we are or we aren't. In other words, our identity and our value are tied up into our performance. Your identity, who you are, and your value in life and your value to the world and your value to your family and your value to yourself is tied up in your performance. That means how you look, how you act, how intelligent you are, how your kids turn out, and what other people think of you. To you, that is synonymous with your worth and your value. And so as a result, success is life, and failure is death. And when you fail, and we all will fail at times, right? If we've ever tried more than one thing, we're gonna fail sometimes. When you fail, you don't see yourself as having failed, you see yourself as a failure. There's a massive difference between those two things. And so this whole performanceism thing, here's what it goes back to. What we call noble, God calls an idol. And to us, that is the key to life, is the outward appearance, not just what we look like physically, but how it appears to other people that we are performing on this planet while we're here. And you need to know that is exhausting. It's exhausting. And I bet if I went around the room, every single person at some level, the things that I just mentioned will resonate with you at least at some level. Every person. And it's exhausting. And here's why that's a challenge. Satan does his best work on exhausted people. He does his best work on tired people. And the reason that I say that is because when you're exhausted, your decision-making ability is a little bit diminished compared to where you normally would be. Now, not all of you are great at decision-making anyway, but you add exhaustion to the mix and it actually gets significantly worse. And if Satan does his best work on exhausted people, I don't really want to live an exhausted life, because a lot of times the real cause of our exhaustion is the drive to save or to justify ourselves by our performance. It also could be you're living two different lives. And you have kind of the life that you want to portray, but yet it battles with who it is that you know you really are. And that's exhausting, because you're terrified if people ever get to know the real you, they're not gonna like the real you. Now here's where it starts to get complicated. And I promise you we're getting to the Bible in just a second. The reason that gets complicated is because if that's how you live your life in general, that's also how you're going to approach God. That's also how you're going to view God and your relationship with God. If you are addicted to performance, and probably many of us, I don't want to say most, but many of us are, if we are addicted to performance, then what is going to happen is that's going to bleed over, and this whole Christianity thing is going to become about a list of rules of do's and don'ts, and to you, it's going to be about got to's rather than get to's, and you're going to be exhausted on one hand and miserable on the other. But you can't show people that you're exhausted or miserable because you're so consumed with the outward appearance that you won't ask for the help that you really, really need and that you can't provide for yourself. Because if you could fix it by yourself, you wouldn't have got into this situation by yourself. Because you got in by yourself, you can't get out by yourself. You're the one who dug the hole. And when I say you, I'm talking about me. It's just that I'm the one up here. All of it. We have done this to ourselves. And so the question becomes, what is it that we're supposed to do? Jesus, in Matthew chapter 11, was talking to a group of people who were they were living in a crazy time. It's not that the world is crazier now than it's ever been. I say this a lot because you do need to know, the world is not crazier now than it's ever been. It's just now we have 24-hour news networks and we have social media and we're inundated in ways that we never have been before. The world has been crazy. It's crazy now, it was crazy then, and it was real crazy at times. And during the time when this was written, when Jesus was having this conversation, he was writing to a bunch of people who were overwhelmed with the cultural standards of the day. On one hand, you have a group of people who are under Roman occupation, so you're trying to live according to the way of life of the Romans, which was exhausting. Because even when the Romans would have dinner, if they had a dinner party, where you sat at the table was contingent upon where it is you were in your life. The wealthiest person would sit here, the poorest person would sit here. The person who had a great job and was an up-and-comer, they would be moving this direction. But a person who didn't have a great job, or maybe they had just lost theirs, they would get moved. Their seat would get moved from where it was the week before to where it was now. Everything was contingent upon where you were in society. And the Jewish people were starting to kind of formulate, and they were starting to see, because they were under Roman occupation, they started to adapt to that cultural standard. Then you combine that with the fact that there was extremely religious people back then. There's extremely religious people now, but they were better at it then than they are now. And as a result, they took what was 10 commandments from God and turned them into 365 different rules. Now, the reason that that's a problem is because who in the world can remember 365 different things? They were the ones who were controlling the playbook. And so you have the Roman cultural standards. You also have these crazy religious standards that were not instituted by Jesus at all. They were instituted by the religious people. And they're trying to figure out, how is it that I measure up, and how is it that I'm supposed to thrive, and how is it that I'm supposed to win in this environment? And Jesus steps up to the plate, so to speak, and here's the message that he sends to a bunch of exhausted people. So it's like if he was preaching right here, right now, these are the words Jesus might offer us at Freedom Church, whether you're in the room or you're watching online. This is what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28. Come to me, all of you, say all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Come to me, come to Jesus, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. So he's saying to me, to JR, hey man, are you tired? Are you exhausted? He doesn't say, if you are, read this blog post or read this article and do these 5 things. That's not what he says. He doesn't say, go to church and write down the 3 points that the pastor gives you that you got to do. Nothing wrong with that. That's all good, because you need to know what to do. But he makes it even more simple than that. And he says, you're living these exhausted lives. Stop. Come to me. And if you come to me, not if you do these other things. This is Jesus talking. And I can just picture him talking because he knew his audience and he knew how to address people. I picture him just like with these eyes of compassion, like, just chill out and come to me. It's almost like you need a vacation from yourself and a vacation from your own erroneous thinking. You need a vacation from the news. You need a vacation from your own mind at times, because you get yourself in these holes. What you need is stop going to other people. Sometimes the answer isn't other people. Sometimes the answer isn't a counselor, although I think most people should probably go to one. Sometimes the answer is to come to Jesus. And just come to me. And if you do, this is what he says. He says, if you will come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, anybody in the room honest enough to say there's times where you're weary and burdened, raise your hand. So all of you who are weary and burdened, he says, come to me and I will give you rest. In other words, hey, are you exhausted? If you're exhausted, just come to me. Are you bitter all the time? Come to me. Are you lonely? Come to me. You're still looking to other people to provide what only I can provide. A lot of times, people that are single say they're lonely, And then they're surprised when they get in a relationship and find out they're still lonely. The reason you're lonely a lot of times is not because there's not another person, it's because you're not going to the right source. So he says, what you need to do is you need to instead come to me. If you're angry, are you angry? Are you ever watching the news and you're just mad? Seeing what's going on in the world, and this is the thought I have. Seriously? How did this happen again? Jesus says, come to me. If you're bitter, all the different things, socially awkward. Most socially awkward people don't know that they're socially awkward. But he says, if you're socially awkward, just come to me. And if you come to me, if you can't figure it out, you ever just feel like you can't figure out this crazy thing called life? Like, you ever just having a conversation with yourself, you don't even tell other people, you're just, I give up. Not like literally give up, but you just give up trying to figure things out. Jesus says, if that's you, what I want you to do is I want you to come to me. Notice what he didn't say. Do better. First of all, what a passive-aggressive, obnoxious hashtag, by the way. Do better. Listen, lady who posted that, have you looked at your Instagram feed? Because right now the pot is calling the kettle black. Do better, you antagonistic psychopath. That should be the new hashtag. Don't do that though, because some of you, but the pastor said I could. No. Some things are better left thought or typed and then deleted before you hit send. That's a sign of maturity, by the way. The ability to hit the button delete before you send it, not afterwards. Jesus isn't saying do better or try harder. And if you do, and you get your life together, then I will come and give you rest. That is not what Jesus said. But isn't it funny? Because that's what religion causes us to believe. And when I say religion, I'm not talking about just the tenets of Christianity. I'm talking about this religious mindset that dominates people that live in the southern part of the United States. This thought that you have to work your way to God. That God is only pleased with you if you are doing pleasing things for him. When I say religion in this context, that's what I'm referring to. Definition of terms is sometimes important. Jesus doesn't say that we need to get our life together. What he says is, hey man, or hey woman, you're a train wreck. Somebody needed to tell you that. You're broken. You do not have things figured out. So what you need to do is come to me. And if you broken train wreck person, if you will come to me, what I will do is I will give you rest. When I give you rest, I'm not just going to give you a nap, although that sounds amazing. He says, I will give you real rest. It's like when he told the lady at the well, I will give you water that will never leave you thirsty again. That's the kind of rest that he's talking about. He says, I will give you that kind of rest. Now, the question is, what does he mean? He's talking about this rest for your soul, where you actually have peace with who you are and whose you are. Some of you, this will be the first time it's ever happened, where you have peace with who you are. I'm not saying, when I say peace with who you are, I'm not talking about people who give themselves permission to do stupid things in the name of that's just who I am. That may be just who you are, except for the fact that if you're a follower of Jesus, you've been filled with the Spirit of God, who is the same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead. So if you have been filled with God's Spirit, that's just who I am is no longer an excuse. What it is a cop-out. Does this make sense? So he gives you, though, peace with who you are, where you can say, I'm comfortable with who God made me. I'm not a mistake. I am loved. I am worthy. I am accepted. I am valuable. I am a child of a king. Therefore, I have royal blood running through my veins. Therefore, I can keep my head up and a smile on my face because I have joy that passes all understanding. It transcends circumstances going on around me. How can you be joyful with all this going on in the world? Because I know that I'm made for another world. In this world, I'm just passing through. We're just passing through. We're passing through. This isn't it. For those of us that are followers of Jesus, we know that we're made for a better world. Jesus says, I will give you peace with whose you are. I'll give you peace with who you are. And the question is, how do we do it practically? Verse 29, take my yoke upon you, which makes no sense. We'll get there in a second. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Now, to them, when he said, take my yoke upon you, that made total sense. Most of us don't really have a context for this unless you've grown up around oxen, which I did not, although my high school was in the middle of a cow field. Now, that being said, show this picture on the screen real quick. This is what he was referring to. Take my yoke upon you. So back then they didn't have this wonderful invention called tractors and plows. So as a result, this was how they would get work done. Well, what they would do is a lot of times they would take a big ox and an experienced ox, and they would put it in the yoke with an inexperienced or a young ox. And the young ox or the inexperienced ox, you know what that joker would do? It would be pulling sideways. It'd be freaking out, trying to figure out how to go forward. But eventually, because it was there with the wiser ox, and because he was there with the bigger ox, and because he was there with the more experienced ox, the other one would eventually show him that you can get more done if you will do things the right way. You don't have to freak out. You don't have to pull sideways with your neck. That's gonna be exhausting. It's gonna hurt. It's not gonna be great. So what Jesus is saying, here's what he's saying. Take my yoke upon you. In other words, strap up with me. And if you will strap up with me and learn from me, I'm gentle and I'm humble in heart, you will find rest for your soul. So what he wants to do is he wants to be able to relieve all of this heavy burden. He wants us to strap up with him. And if we will strap up with him, he will replace that burden with a life filled with purpose. You will find rest that only Jesus can provide. Why? Verse 30, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. The problem is most of us, we try to do it ourselves because we were taught in a culture that values that's how we're supposed to do everything. I don't need any help. I'll pull myself up by my own bootstraps. I'll do this, that, and the other. I'm a big boy, or I'm a smart girl. You don't say I'm a big girl. I'm a big boy and a smart girl. I will figure this out by myself. I will do this thing my way because I'm a man or because I'm a woman. And Jesus says, do that if you want to and live an exhausted, unfulfilled life. If you do this my way, it will be better. There will be more joy. There will be more hope. There will be more peace. Not only will there be more joy, hope, and peace, but you will have rest. Even in a world that has lost its mind, you can have rest. Try to do it your own way if you want to, but there is a much better way, is what Jesus is getting at. One time, when Bryce and London were younger, they were probably like 7 and 10. It's about right, 7 and 10. They moved their rooms around all the time. They're my whole family, except for me, is redecorating fools, all of them. They love switching bedrooms. I'll come home and Devin will have like sold half the stuff in our house and replaced it already. It's unbelievable. It's a good thing I don't have a blind animal because that joker would be running into stuff all day long. Stuff's moved around. It's unreal. Well, my kids are like that. And they were like 7 and 10 and they're trying to push this mattress up the stairs. And they were not doing it very well. And so I walked past them mostly because, not even so much because I wanted to help, just because I did not want them to destroy the walls on the way up. And I just grabbed it by the little handle and I just started pulling up the stairs. And all of a sudden, they're like, man, we're so strong. I think Bryce was the youngest. He's like, oh, I know he was the youngest because he's the youngest. But he's like, look, Dad, I'm so strong. I'm like, Bryce, I didn't tell him, but I'm thinking, the only reason you're even getting anywhere is because there's somebody up in front of you who's leading the way. And ultimately, that's what this message is about. Allow Jesus to lead the way in your life. Try to push that mattress all you want and struggle and become exhausted, or take my yoke upon you. And then you will see that the burden is far lighter than what you ever imagined. So for us, here's the deal. The only way to do it, take your eyes off your performance. Follower of Jesus, take your eyes off your performance and keep your eyes on Jesus, the author and the perfecter of our faith. Eyes on him. He's the only way. He's the only one. Don't forget it, because you will. I forget it. There'll probably be some time this week where I'll forget it for a minute and I'll have to remind myself. Sometimes the best messages are not the one you hear preached to you. They're the ones you remember and preach to yourself. Eyes on Jesus. Those of you that are not yet followers of Jesus, here's the best advice I can give you. You can do this on your own, in your mind, but it's going to lead you down a road you never intended to travel, where you will live separated from God forever. Or you can do this thing God's way, admit that you're not good enough, and ask Jesus to apply what he has already done for you to your life. And he will step into your life and he will make all things new. And everything in your life will change. You won't become perfect and life won't become perfect, but your life will change in an instant. Jesus can do more in a moment than religion or your effort can do in a lifetime. And so if that's you and you're ready to receive what Jesus did for you, you're ready to turn your life over to him and to say yes to him, I'm going to give you that opportunity right now. All over this room, if you would, just bow your head and close your eyes. If you're ready to say yes to Jesus, you're ready to stop trying to do this thing on your own. You know that you need outside intervention. You need the forgiveness that only Jesus can provide. That you just pray this prayer with me as I prayed out loud. Say, Lord, the best way I know how. I turn from my sin. I turn to Jesus. I'm asking you to make all things new. Step into my life. I need you to be my Lord and my Savior from this day forward. That's my desire. That's my prayer. I confess with my mouth that Jesus is Lord. I believe in my heart that God has raised him from the dead. So as a result, thank you for changing and saving me today. With your head still bowed and eyes still closed, would you do me a huge favor? If you just prayed that prayer with me, I know it's the 9 a.m. worship experience. I know that this is the crowd that loves Jesus the most. But if you're here today and you just prayed that prayer with me, I want to place something in your hand, and the only way for me to do it is to see where you are. So right where you are, when I say 3, I want you to raise your hand just long enough for us to come and place a card in your hand. As soon as you get it, you can put your hand down. But if you're here today and you just said yes to Jesus, just throw that hand up when I say 3. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Come on, nobody looking around, but if that's you, raise your hand high. That's great. If you're watching online, follow the instructions that you see right there on the screen. Do me a favor, all over the room, stand to your feet. If you would, stand to your feet. Let me pray for you one more time. Dear Lord, I love you. I'm grateful for you. I pray for every single person here. God, I pray that you would give us rest. I pray that you would help us to not live exhausted lives because we're addicted to performance and trying to prove ourselves to a God who already is head over heels in love with us. Lord, help us to stop trying to find what it is that we've already been given as a result of what you've done for us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.